The rain hammered the tin roof of Willow Creek high like 1,000 accusations, each drop echoing the whispers that had followed Charlotte Hayes through the hallways for 3 merciless years. "Freak," they hissed, a word sharp as the switchblade her father kept in the glove box of his rusted Ford. But it was Rebecca Langford's voice that cut deepest, laced with the honeyed drawl of old money and unearned cruelty. On that final day, as Charlotte clutched her soaked notebook to her chest and fled toward the parking lot, Rebecca's laughter chased her into the storm, a sound that would linger like smoke in her lungs for decades. 15 years later, in the humid cradle of Eldridge, Georgia, a town where magnolias bloomed defiant against cracked sidewalks and the Confederate ghosts still whispered from sagging porches, Charlotte stood behind the counter of Hayes Hollow, her diner a sanctuary stitched from salvaged barn wood and second-hand dreams. The place smelled of cornbread baking slow in the oven and chicory coffee strong enough to wake the dead. A far cry from the chain-link fences and faded glory of her youth. Eldridge hadn't changed much. The mill had shuttered in '09, leaving behind a hollow of unemployment checks and church suppers that preached forgiveness but practiced judgment. Charlotte had returned not out of nostalgia but necessity. Her mother's stroke 2 years back had tethered her to the family plot, and in the quiet hours before dawn, when the jukebox hummed low with Patsy Cline, she wondered if roots were chains or lifelines. She wiped down the Formica counter with a rag that had seen better days, her movements deliberate, each swipe erasing the invisible stains of the morning rush. At 38, Charlotte carried her queerness like a well-worn coat, buttoned tight against the chill of small-town stares. It wasn't the overt slurs anymore. No one in Eldridge had the energy for that. But the sidelong glances when she lingered too long at the farmer's market, or the way Pastor Ellis's sermons on family values, seemed to pivot toward her pew every Sunday. She'd built Hayes Hollow as armor. Plates of fried green tomatoes steaming with possibility, biscuits flaky as fresh starts, all served with a smile that dared the world to look away. Business was steady, enough to cover the mortgage on the little shotgun house down by the creek, where fireflies danced like forgotten prayers at dusk. The bell above the door jingled like a hesitant confession, pulling Charlotte from her reverie. In walked a girl. No, a young woman, really 17 or so, with rain-slicked hair the color of wet chestnuts and eyes wide as the Chattahoochee after a storm. She hesitated in the threshold, backpack slung low over one shoulder, clothes clinging damp to her frame. A thrift store flannel over a band tee faded from too many washes, jeans frayed at the hems like the edges of a secret. Charlotte knew that look. The hunger that went beyond empty stomachs, the kind that settled in your bones when home was a battlefield. "Evenin'," Charlotte said, her voice steady as the river that carved the town's borders. "Grab a booth. Menus on the table." The girl nodded, sliding into the vinyl seat nearest the window, where the neon open sign cast a pink halo over the checkered tablecloth. She scanned the laminated pages with fingers that trembled just a touch, then closed it without a word. Charlotte poured a glass of sweet tea, unsweetened for the tourists, but this one looked local, in need of the sugar's false comfort, and set it down with a wedge of lemon curling like a question mark. "On the house," Charlotte added, meeting those eyes for the first time. They were green, flecked with gold, holding a storm of their own. Something tugged at the edges of memory, a shadow flitting just out of reach, but Charlotte pushed it down. Ghosts had no place in the dinner shift. "I'm Lila," the girl said finally, her voice soft, threaded with the same drawl that marked everyone born within 50 miles of Eldridge. "Lila Langford." The name landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading cold through Charlotte's chest. Langford. Rebecca's name, unchanged from the yearbook scrawls and the taunts that had branded her. But this girl Lila carried none of that venom. Her face was open, vulnerable, a canvas yet to be scarred. Charlotte's pulse quickened, not with anger but a weary curiosity. What cruel joke was fate playing now, dredging up the past in the form of a child who looked half-starved and wholly lost? "Charlotte Hayes," she replied, extending a hand across the table. Lila took it, her grip tentative, skin cool from the rain. "What'll it be, Lila Langford? We've got meatloaf that'd make your grandma weep, or catfish fresh from the river if you're feeling adventurous." Lila's lips quirked in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just whatever's cheapest. I'm short on cash tonight." Charlotte held her gaze a beat longer, reading the unspoken plea. In Eldridge, short on cash often meant short on everything. A father's bottle, a mother's indifference, the world's indifference. She nodded once, turning back to the kitchen without another word. The grill sizzled under her hands as she plated the special. Smothered pork chops with collards and cornbread, heaped generous enough to feed a prodigal son. When she set it down, steam rising like an offering, Lila's breath caught. "You didn't have to. Everyone's got to eat," Charlotte cut in gently, sliding into the booth opposite her. The diner was empty now, save for old Mr. Thibodeau nursing his coffee in the corner, lost in the sports page. Besides, it's closing time soon. Company won't hurt. Lila forked into the meal with a hunger that bordered on reverence, each bite easing the tension from her shoulders. Between mouthfuls, words spilled out in fits and starts. School was a grind at Willow Creek, where cliques formed like storm clouds and teachers looked the other way. Home was a mansion on Magnolia Lane, all white columns and polished lies, but her mom Rebecca was always at the country club pretending everything's fine. Charlotte listened, her own fork idle on the edge of her untouched plate, the pieces slotting into place like a puzzle she'd long since abandoned. Rebecca Langford, Queen Bee of '07, daughter of the mill owner who'd squeezed Eldridge dry before skipping town for Atlanta high-rises. She'd married money, old Harlan Voss, the banker with the handshake like a vice, and birthed Lila in a world that demanded perfection. But perfection cracked. Charlotte knew that much from the gossip vines that snaked through the Piggly Wiggly checkout lines. Harlan's affairs, Rebecca's pills, a daughter caught in the crossfire. "You're different," Lila said suddenly, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Not like the other places. They stare, you know? Like I'm something they stepped in." Charlotte's laugh was low, rueful. "Darlin', I've been stared at my whole life. Builds character. Or calluses. Take your pick." There it was again, that flicker in Lila's eyes. A recognition that went beyond words. The rain had eased to a drizzle, tapping Morse code on the windowpane, and as the clock ticked toward 9, Charlotte felt the pull of something unnamed, a thread unraveling from the past into the now. She didn't know then that this girl, with her guarded smiles and storm-tossed gaze, would unravel her defenses thread by thread, exposing the scars she buried under layers of grease and grace. But in that booth, under the diner's forgiving light, the first knot loosened. The days blurred into a rhythm as steady as the freight trains rumbling through Eldridge at midnight, their horns a lonesome wail that mirrored the ache Charlotte carried in her ribs. Hayes Hollow became Lila's unofficial refuge, the girl slipping in after school like a shadow seeking shelter, her backpack thumping against the booth cushions as she claimed her spot by the window. Charlotte never charged her. Plates of shrimp and grits appeared without fanfare, bowls of peach cobbler scooped warm from the pan, and in return Lila offered fragments of herself, stories doled out like rations in a siege. It started small, tales of Willow Creek's unyielding hierarchy, where cheerleaders ruled with smiles sharper than pom-poms, and the theater kids whispered in corners about dreams too big for the county line. Lila was neither. She drifted the edges, sketching in her notebook during algebra, her drawings fierce lines of faces and forgotten places. Eldridge reimagined as a city of spires and secrets. "I want out," she'd say, tracing the rim of her glass with a fingertip, voice dropping low as if the walls had ears. "Somewhere they don't care who you love, or how." Charlotte would nod, refilling the tea without spilling a drop, her own history a locked trunk she rarely opened. But Lila's presence chipped at the hinges. One evening, as fire ants marched in procession across the gravel lot outside, the girl unburdened more. Her father's rages fueled by bourbon and bounce checks, her mother's absences veiled in the scent of Chanel and charity luncheons. "She used to be different," Lila murmured, pushing peas around her plate. "Before Dad. Like she had fire in her, but now it's just ash." The name hung unspoken, Rebecca, but Charlotte heard it echo. She remembered that fire, twisted into something destructive, aimed at her like a loaded gun. In the hallways of Willow Creek, Rebecca had been the architect of Charlotte's isolation. Lockers slammed on fingers, notes stuffed into textbooks proclaiming Dyke in looping cursive, the time she'd cornered Charlotte by the bleachers after gym, breath hot against her ear. "You think you're special? Preying on girls like me? Stay in your lane, Hayes." It wasn't just words. It was the theft of safety, the way laughter turned venomous, leaving Charlotte to navigate her desires in silence, stealing glances at Ellie Ramirez's profile in English class, her heart a traitor pounding against the cage of conformity. But Eldridge bred survivors, and Charlotte had learned to tend her wounds in secret. After graduation, she'd fled to Savannah, waitressing in a beachside cafe where the salt air tasted of reinvention. There, in the humid press of drag shows and dive bars, she'd kissed a woman for the first time, Juniper, with tattoos like maps of forgotten islands, and felt the world tilt toward possibility. They lasted 2 summers, tangled in sheets that smelled of sea salt and regret, until Juniper chased a record deal to Nashville, leaving Charlotte with a hollow ache and a lesson etched deep. Love in the margins was a gamble with loaded dice. Back in Eldridge now, with Lila's laughter ringing tentative through the diner, first sparked by a botched attempt at whistling Wagon Wheel on the jukebox, Charlotte felt that old tilt returning, subtle as a tide pulling at the shore. They'd linger after closing, the girl perched on a stool while Charlotte mopped floors, trading stories like contraband. Lila confessed her sketches were escapes, visions of Oregon's rainy coasts where she could be just Lila, no explanations. Charlotte shared snippets of Savannah's neon nights, the thrill of hands held under tables, the sting of goodbyes unspoken. One Thursday, as goldenrod bloomed riotous along the roadside ditches, Lila arrived with a sketchbook clutched like a shield. "For you," she said, shoving it across the counter, cheeks flushed under the freckles. Charlotte flipped it open to a double-page spread. Haze hollow rendered in charcoal strokes, alive with motion, the grill's glow, steam curling from pots, her own silhouette behind the counter, captured mid-turn with a softness she hadn't seen in mirrors for years. In the corner, a small figure in the booth, head bent over a plate, but the eyes, those eyes, looked up with a hunger that mirrored Charlotte's own buried longing. "It's beautiful," Charlotte whispered, tracing the lines with reverence. Their fingers brushed, electric as a live wire, and the air thickened, charged with the unsaid. Lila's breath hitched, her gaze dropping to Charlotte's mouth, then away, toward the window where lightning bugs began their evening vigil. In that suspended moment, the diner felt vast and intimate, a world unto itself, where the past shadows held their breath. But shadows lengthened. The next week, whispers slithered in with the lunch crowd. Harlan Voss's bank was foreclosing on half the town, including the old textile warehouse by the tracks. Rebecca was rallying the garden club for a Save Eldridge fundraiser, her smile plastered on flyers tacked to telephone poles. Charlotte spotted one fluttering in the breeze outside. Rebecca's face unchanged, blonde waves, blue eyes like chipped ice, and felt the old nausea rise. She crumpled it, tossing it into the trash with yesterday's grease, but the encounter loomed, inevitable as kudzu claiming offense. Lila noticed the shift, her questions gentle probes over bowls of gumbo. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Charlotte deflected with a joke about bad coffee, but inside, the trunk creaked open wider, memories spilling. The night Rebecca's clique had dumped Charlotte's books into the creek, pages dissolving like confessions, the way she'd hidden her first crush, a poem folded into an origami heart, only to have it unearthed and read aloud in the cafeteria, laughter crashing like waves. Different, they'd called it then, the word a brand. Now, with Lila's warmth seeping through the cracks, Charlotte wondered if different could mean salvation instead of sin. As autumn crept in, leaves turning crimson warnings on the oaks, their evenings deepened. Lila helped close up one night, stacking chairs with an efficiency born of necessity, her flannel sleeve brushing Charlotte's arm as they reached for the same stool. The contact lingered, a spark jumping the gap, and when their eyes met, the world narrowed to the space between them, 2 inches, then 1, then the soft press of lips that tasted of cornbread and courage. It was tentative, a question posed in the quiet, but Charlotte answered with hands cupping Lila's face, thumbs tracing jawlines etched with youth's uncertainty. They pulled apart, breaths mingling, the diner's clock ticking like a heartbeat. "Is this okay?" Lila whispered, fear and fire warring in her voice. Charlotte nodded, forehead to forehead, the weight of years dissolving in that shared exhale. For the first time since Savannah, she felt seen, not as the freak from Willow Creek, but as Charlotte, whole and wanting. But in Eldridge, where magnolias hid thorns, such tenderness was a fragile bloom, destined to draw the frost. Winter wrapped Eldridge in a chill that seeped through the cracks of clapboard houses, frosting the windows of Hayes Hollow with lace patterns that blurred the line between inside and out. Charlotte and Lila navigated their new closeness with the caution of thieves in the night, stolen glances across the counter, fingers intertwining under the table when the last customer shuffled out, the diner's doorbell tinkling like a conspirator's wink. It was a secret language of touches, Lila's knee pressing against Charlotte's in the booth, the brush of knuckles as they passed the salt, late-night texts flickering on screens, Lila's words, "Miss your laugh already," a balm against the isolation of her upstairs bedroom in the Voss mansion. But secrets in small towns were like kudzu vines, harmless at first, then all-consuming. Charlotte felt the eyes before she heard the murmurs, Mrs. Hargrove lingering too long over her deviled eggs, her gaze flicking between the girl in the corner booth and the woman plating orders, the teenage busboys exchanging smirks when Lila helped bus tables, her laughter too bright, too easy. Charlotte told herself it was paranoia. Echoes of high school hallways. But the knot in her gut tightened with each passing day. She'd built this life on quiet defiance, pouring coffee for the same faces that once turned away, tipping her hat to the ghosts of judgment. But Lila stirred something reckless, a willingness to burn it all for one more moment of unguarded joy. One snow-dusted afternoon in December, as carols crackled faintly from the jukebox, Bing Crosby crooning about white Christmases that Eldridge rarely saw, Lila burst through the door, cheeks rosy from the cold, a wrapped parcel clutched to her chest. "Merry almost Christmas," she announced, sliding it across the counter with a grin that lit the dim interior like dawn. Inside was a handmade scarf, knit in uneven stitches of deep green wool, threaded with the scent of pine from Lila's hurried crafting in the attic. "I suck at this stuff, but you always look cold back here." Charlotte's throat closed around the warmth blooming there, unwrapping the gift with hands that trembled just a fraction. She draped it over her shoulders, the wool soft against her neck, and pulled Lila into a hug that lingered, bodies aligning in the alcove behind the register. "It's perfect," she murmured into the girl's hair, inhaling the faint lavender of her shampoo. In that embrace, the world outside faded, the foreclosure notices piling up at Harlan's desk, the garden club's petitions circulating like flu, Rebecca's name on every tongue. Here it was just them, two souls carving space in the margins. Yet the margins closed in. That evening, as they shared a pot of chili by the grill, spoons clinking in companionable rhythm, the door swung open with a force that rattled the salt shakers. Harlan Voss filled the frame, his overcoat dusted with flurries, face ruddy from wind or whiskey. His eyes, small and shrewd behind wire-rimmed glasses, swept the room and landed on Lila, then Charlotte, the pieces assembling in his scowl. "Lila Marie," he barked, voice booming off the paneled walls. "What in God's name are you doing here again? We've got supper waiting. Your mother's slaving over the roast." Lila stiffened, spoon pausing midair, the color draining from her face. "It's just chili, Dad. I'm helping out." Charlotte's short-staffed. Harlan's laugh was a bark devoid of mirth. He strode forward, boots tracking slush across the floorboards, ignoring Charlotte's offered nod. "Helping? That's what you call it? Loitering in this establishment, wasting time with folks who don't know their place." His gaze slid to Charlotte then, appraising, laced with the disdain of a man who'd balanced ledgers on the backs of the working poor. "Miss Hayes. Fine cook, they say, but charity begins at home. Or in our case, Magnolia Lane." The words landed like blows, each one dredging the silt of old wounds. Charlotte held her ground, wiping her hands on her apron, voice even as the Chattahoochee in flood. "Lila's welcome here anytime, Mr. Voss. Paying customer or not. Doors always open." Harlan's lip curled, a predator-scenting weakness. "Open for what, exactly? I hear things, you know. Whispers about Willow Creek days, reputations that stick like tar. My daughter ain't part of your experiments." He grabbed Lila's arm, yanking her from the stool with a grip that whitened her knuckles. She winced but didn't cry out, eyes pleading toward Charlotte. "Help me, forgive me in that silent storm." "Stop," Charlotte said, stepping forward, the scarf suddenly heavy as chains. "She's not a child to be dragged. Let her choose." Harlan rounded on her, breath sour with scotch. "Choose? In this town? You think you're some hero feeding scraps to strays? Keep your handouts to the Mexicans down by the tracks. Lila Carr. Now. Lila hesitated, torn, then followed him out into the swirling snow, the door slamming like a verdict. Charlotte stood frozen, the chilly cooling untouched, Harlan's words echoing the taunts of 15 years past. Experiments. As if her heart were a lab, her love a specimen to be dissected. She sank onto the stool, head in hands, the diner vast and empty around her. Outside, the Voss Cadillac purred to life, taillights fading into the whiteout, carrying away the girl who'd begun to feel like home. That night, sleep evaded her, the shotgun house creaking under the wind's assault. Charlotte paced the kitchen, phone clutched like a talisman, Lila's texts arriving in bursts. I'm sorry. He's just scared. Loves you us. In his way. The words blurred with tears Charlotte hadn't shed since her mother's hospital vigil. By dawn resolve hardened. She couldn't let Eldridge's poison seep into this fragile thing they'd found. But how to fight a town that wore its prejudices like Sunday best? The next day brought uneasy truce. Lila slipped in during lunch, subdued, avoiding Harlan's shadow at the door. They spoke in code, orders for extra spice. Meaning I miss you. A nod toward the back, an invitation to the alley for a hurried kiss, cold lips warming in the steam from the dumpsters. It was survival, this dance on knife's edge, but Charlotte felt the blades bite deepen. Rebecca's fundraisers loomed, banners fluttering from lampposts. Preserve our heritage, join the fight. Charlotte wondered what heritage they meant, the one that buried girls like her, or the one Lila dreamed of escaping to. As Christmas neared with lights strung haphazard like false hopes across Main Street, Charlotte planned a quiet gift. A bus ticket to Portland, tucked into the scarf's folds, a whisper of freedom. But on Christmas Eve, as snow blanketed the hollows, the past collided with the present in the form of a knock at the diner's back door. Rebecca Langford stood there, elegant in cashmere, her face a mask of polished regret. Charlotte, she said, voice stripped of its old venom. We need to talk about my daughter. The words hung heavy, a gauntlet thrown into the frost-kissed air, and Charlotte stepped aside, knowing this confrontation would shatter the fragile peace they'd built, or forge something unbreakable from the shards. Rebecca Langford glided into Hayes Hollow like a specter from a half-remembered nightmare, her heels clicking against the linoleum with the precision of a metronome counting down to reckoning. The diner was hushed, Christmas lights twinkling from the rafters like hesitant stars, casting Rebecca's face in alternating shadows, cheekbones sharp as accusations, eyes that once burned with teenage malice now dulled by the grind of unfulfilled promises. She carried a poinsettia in a foil pot, its red bracts bleeding accusation, and set it on the counter with hands that bore the weight of manicured nails and unpaid debts. Close up? Rebecca asked, glancing at the empty booths, the clock edging toward 8. It wasn't a question, but Charlotte nodded, flipping the sign to closed, with a flick that belied the storm in her veins. The door's lock snicked home, sealing them in this confessional space, the air thick with the ghosts of grease and grace. They settled at the counter, Charlotte pouring coffee black as midnight, Rebecca's old vice unchanged, while the woman's gaze roamed the room, lingering on the sketch Lila had pinned above the register. A charcoal magnolia, petals unfurling defiant. She's talented, Rebecca said, stirring sugar in slow circles. Always scribbling even as a child. Harlan thinks it's a phase. I thought I'd have more time to figure it out. Charlotte leaned against the sink, arms crossed like a barrier. The scarf Lila knit draped over the coat rack like a flag of truce. Figure what out? Your daughter's not a puzzle, Rebecca. She's a person. With dreams bigger than this town can hold. Rebecca's laugh was brittle, cracking at the edges. Dreams? God, you sound like I used to. Before the wedding, before the bank, before everything turned to ash. She sipped the coffee, wincing at the heat, and for a moment, the queen bee facade slipped, revealing the woman beneath, lines etched by late-night ledgers, by Harlan's infidelities whispered over bridge games, by a pill bottle that promised sleep but delivered fog. I came to warn you, Charlotte. Harlan sniffing around. He saw the way Lila looks at you, talks about you, as stirring things. The air grew heavier, charged with the unspeakable. Charlotte's mind raced back to Willow Creek lockers, the slam of metal, Rebecca's voice coiling like smoke. Stay away from my friend's haze. We don't need your kind tainting things. Tainting. As if love were a stain, her desires a contagion. But now, facing this ghost across chipped mugs, Charlotte saw the rot beneath the polish. Rebecca, trapped in the same cage she'd helped build, her fire banked to embers by the weight of expectation. Stirring what? Charlotte pressed, voice low, the words a challenge. The same old poison you peddled back in school? Calling girls like me freaks, making sure we knew our place. At the back alone. Rebecca's cup clattered against the saucer, coffee sloshing like spilled secrets. Color rose in her cheeks, not shame but defensiveness, the old armor buckling. You think I don't regret it? High school was survival. My father ruled Eldridge like a king, and I was his princess, had to be perfect, untouchable. You were different. A threat to that. To everything I was taught to protect. She met Charlotte's eyes then, raw, the blue depths swirling with a pain that mirrored her own. But I was wrong. Cruel. And now seeing Lila with you. It's like looking at a second chance I don't deserve. The admission hung between them, fragile as the snowflakes drifting past the window. Charlotte wanted to lash out, to hurl back the years of isolation. The proms skipped, the crushes buried. The way Rebecca's clique had isolated her until different became a solitary echo. But the anger ebbed, replaced by a weary empathy. Rebecca wasn't the villain anymore. She was a casualty, molded by the same societal vice that squeezed them all. Women expected to smile through the fractures, to uphold the facade of Southern belle grace while their souls frayed at the hems. Tell me about her, Charlotte said instead, sliding onto the stool beside her, the space between them shrinking. Not the version Harlan sees. The real Lila. Rebecca's shoulders sagged, the poinsettia wilting slightly in the warmth. Words poured then, a dam breaking. Lila's first steps in the mansion's grand hall, giggling as she chased dust motes. The day she came home from middle school with a bruised cheek from a playground shove, whispering, they said I'm weird for liking girls' comics. The nights Rebecca lay awake, listening to her daughter's muffled sobs through the wall, Harlan's snores drowning out any intervention. I failed her, Rebecca confessed, voice fracturing. Tried to be the mother my own was, strong, silent, but silence is just another cage. And now with the bank crumbling, the fundraiser's a joke. She's slipping away to you. To something real. Charlotte reached out, hesitant, covering Rebecca's hand with her own. The touch was electric, not with the spark of Lila's youth, but a shared current of survival. She's not slipping. She's choosing. And if that's me, then we'll face it together. But Harlan. Harlan's a bully in a suit, Rebecca interrupted, pulling back but holding the gaze. Always has been. But he's scared. Eldridge is dying, and he's clinging to the old ways like a life raft. Your diner. It's a threat. A place where people like Lila, like us, can breathe. The us landed soft, an olive branch wrapped in thorns. Charlotte saw it then. The flicker of what might have been, back in Willow Creek, if cruelty hadn't won the day. Rebecca, with her sharp wit and hidden sketches, buried under layers of expectation. But regrets were ghosts, not guides, and Charlotte rose, clearing the cups with deliberate calm. Go home to her. Tell her I said Merry Christmas. And Rebecca, forgiveness isn't free. But it's possible. Rebecca stood, smoothing her coat, the poinsettia reclaimed like a talisman. At the door she paused, turning with eyes glistening. Thank you. For feeding her. For seeing her. The bell jingled her exit, leaving Charlotte in the hush, heart pounding with the weight of what she'd glimpsed. Not just absolution but alliance fragile as new ice. Christmas morning dawned brittle, the town blanketed in white, church bells tolling distant invitations. Lila arrived at noon, slipping through the back like a secret, her embrace fierce against the cold. They spent the day in the kitchen, baking pecan pies that overflowed with sticky sweetness, laughter bubbling as flour dusted their hair like fresh snow. But Harlan's shadow loomed, his text to Lila curt summons, and as evening fell, the Voss Cadillac idled outside, engine growling impatience. I don't want to go, Lila whispered, forehead pressed to Charlotte's, the scarf wound tight around them both. This feels like home. It is, Charlotte replied, kissing her temple, the taste of sugar lingering. But go. For now. We'll make more homes. Lila left with a promise in her eyes, but the night brought storm, literal and figurative. Harlan's rage erupted at the mansion. Words hurled like fists. Accusations of scandal, threats of boarding schools in Chattanooga. Lila texted in panic, then silence, and Charlotte drove through the squall, tires hydroplaning on slick roads, arriving at Magnolia Lane to find Lila on the porch, suitcase in hand, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "He knows," she sobbed as Charlotte pulled her into the truck. "About us. Said he'd ruin you. Foreclose on the diner, tell everyone what you are." The engine roared to life, wipers slashing at the rain, and Charlotte gripped the wheel, jaw set. "Let him try. We're done hiding." They fled to the shotgun house, the space too small for two but vast with possibility. Blankets piled on the floor, a fire crackling in the grate, bodies entwining with desperate tenderness. In the afterglow, Lila traced Charlotte's scars, visible and not, whispering vows against skin. But dawn brought reality. A notice taped to the diner's door, Harlan's signature stark. Eviction proceedings, citing code violations that smelled of vendetta. The fight had begun, Eldridge's underbelly exposed, and Charlotte knew the high cost of love in a town that devoured its own. Spring uncoiled in Eldridge with a vengeance, dogwoods exploding pink against the greening hills, but the air carried the tang of impending fracture, like ozone before thunder. Hayes Hollow teetered on the brink, the foreclosure notice a scarlet letter pinned to the door, drawing stares from the morning coffee clatch and murmurs that rippled through the aisles of the feed store. Charlotte kept the doors open by sheer will, serving hash browns with a smile that masked the gnawing fear, tallying debts in a ledger stained with coffee rings. But each night as she locked up, the weight pressed heavier, Harlan's machinations a noose tightening slow. Lila became her anchor and her ache, splitting time between the mansion's cold opulence and the shotgun house's warm clutter, her presence a rebellion etched in stolen hours. They'd walk the creek at dusk, hands linked under the cover of twilight, Lila's head on Charlotte's shoulder as they skipped stones across the water, ripples symbolizing the lives they dared to disrupt. "I love you," Lila said one evening, the words simple as birdsong, yet they landed profound, stirring echoes of Juniper's farewells and the crushes Charlotte had mourned in silence. Love in Eldridge wasn't just a feeling, it was a declaration of war. Rebecca, surprisingly, became an ally in the shadows. She slipped notes under the diner's mat, updates on Harlan's bluster, offers of legal contacts from her Atlanta cousins, and once, over clandestine coffee after hours, confessed her own buried truths. "I kissed a girl once," she admitted, voice barely above the hum of the fridge. "Summer camp in the Smokies. Thought it was a fluke until you in high school stirred it up. I lashed out because I was terrified of myself." The revelation bridged the chasm, turning foe to fellow traveler, their shared glances laden with the what-ifs of parallel lives. But Harlan Voss was no ghost to be appeased. He was flesh and fury, wielding the bank's ledger like a gavel. He stormed Hayes Hollow midweek, flanked by a deputy with a mustache like a broom bristle, demanding keys for an inspection. The lunch crowd hushed, forks hovering, as Charlotte faced him across the counter, apron tied like battle armor. "This is harassment, Harlan. Eldridge knows it." He smirked, eyes cold as the river in January. "Harassment? I'm protecting investments. Your little arrangement with my daughter? That's the real scandal. Folks talk, Charlotte, about Willow Creek days, reputations dragging good names down. Close up quiet, or I'll make sure every pew in First Baptist hears the sermon on Sodom." The threat coiled low, venomous, dredging the old isolation. The way Rebecca's taunts had amplified into a chorus, classmates averting eyes, teachers feigning blindness. Charlotte's hands fisted at her sides, knuckles whitening, but Lila's voice cut through from the kitchen door, steady despite the tremor. "Dad, stop. It's over. I'm leaving with her if I have to." Harlan whirled, face purpling. "Leaving? For what? A life slinging grease and playing house with the town dyke? You'll be back, tail between your legs, when the world chews you up." The word, dyke, slammed into Charlotte like a fist, raw and regressive, stripping years in an instant. The diner gasped collectively, Mrs. Hargrove clutching her pearls, but Lila stepped forward, chin lifted, fire in her veins. "That's my love you're talking about. And yeah, maybe the world chews. But I'd rather teeth marks from living than your chokehold. Harlan lunged, hand raised, but Rebecca materialized from the shadows, summoned by a frantic text, her car screeching into the lot moments before. She intercepted, gripping his arm with surprising steel. Enough, Harlan. You've blustered your way through 2 decades. This ends now. Her voice, laced with the old Queen Bee command, brooked no argument. The deputy shifted uncomfortably, averting his gaze as husband and wife squared off, the air crackling with the unsaid fractures of their marriage. He stormed out, deputy in tow, the bells jangle a mocking farewell, but the damage lingered. Petitions circulated that week, Save Our Town, Boycott the Hollow, fueled by whispers of moral decay. The diners till running drier than the creek in July. Charlotte lay awake nights, Lila curled against her plotting escapes. Portland's art collectives for Lila, a food truck in Savannah for herself. But roots ran deep, twisted with her mother's frail health and the diner's legacy, her father's hammer marks in the beams, her own sweat in the mortar. The breaking point came at the Garden Club's Heritage Gala. A fundraiser in the Old Mill Ballroom, chandeliers dripping crystals like ironic tears over folding tables laden with deviled eggs and debutante dreams. Rebecca had insisted they attend, neutral ground she said, to show united front. But Charlotte went armored in resolve, Lila on her arm, their hands linked defiantly under the tablecloth. The room buzzed with Eldridge's elite. Bankers in bow ties, wives in pearls, Pastor Ellis droning blessings over the punch bowl. Harlan held court at the head table, his toast a veiled barb. To preserving what makes us Eldridge, family, faith, the old ways that bind us. Eyes flicked toward Charlotte and Lila, murmurs rising like steam. Then Rebecca rose, glass in hand, her gown a cascade of midnight silk. To the new ways, she countered, voice carrying clear. The ones that free us. Like the love that built this town. Hidden in attics and alleys waiting for light. Gasps rippled, Harlan's face twisting, but Lila squeezed Charlotte's hand, a lifeline. The speech unfolded then. A reckoning, Rebecca laying bare the mill's exploitation, Harlan's affairs, her own complicity in high school cruelties. I bullied a girl once, she said, eyes locking on Charlotte's across the room. Called her different because I was afraid of my own heart. But different is what saves us. Charlotte Hayes feeds this town body and soul. Her diner isn't the problem. Our silence is. The room fractured. Applause from the young, hisses from the old guard, Harlan rising red-faced to drag her away. Chaos erupted, chairs scraping, voices overlapping, and in the melee Charlotte pulled Lila toward the exit, but Harlan blocked them, fist clenched. You think this changes anything? She's mine. No. Lila spat, stepping between them, voice breaking but unbroken. I'm no one's. And neither is she. The punch landed on Lila's shoulder, a glancing blow, but it ignited the powder keg. Charlotte surged forward, shoving Harlan back, the deputy, now off duty and tipsy, wrestling him down as shouts filled the air. Rebecca knelt by Lila, apologies tumbling, and in the blur, Charlotte cradled her girl, the ballroom spinning into a vortex of revelation and ruin. Outside, under a canopy of stars indifferent to human storms, they stumbled into the truck, hearts pounding tandem. The gala's fallout would echo, foreclosures halted by public outcry, Harlan's resignation whispered by week's end. But in that moment, fleeing the mill's looming shadow, Charlotte felt the cage door swing wide. Betrayal had cracked it, Rebecca's, Harlan's, the town's, but love, fierce and unyielding, would carry them through. Summer scorched Eldridge into submission, the sun baking the earth until the air shimmered with heat haze, mirages dancing over the asphalt like false promises. Hayes Hollow endured, its doors flung wide to catch the breeze off the Chattahoochee. Fans whirring lazy circles overhead as Charlotte slung plates of okra fries and iced tea sweating condensation. The boycott had fizzled under the gala's glare. Rebecca's speech a viral whisper on county Facebook groups. Harlan's disgrace a cautionary tale swapped over fences. But victory tasted bittersweet, laced with the bruises blooming on Lila's skin and the fault lines snaking through the Voss marriage. Lila moved into the shotgun house that June. Her suitcase unpacked in the spare room that smelled of cedar and possibility, sketches papering the walls like banners of claim, their life wove into domestic poetry. Mornings with coffee on the porch swing, creaking under shared weight. Evenings tangled in sheets, bodies mapping each other with reverent hands, whispers of forever, exchanged like vows. Charlotte taught her to knead dough, fingers sinking into flour-dusted resilience. Lila coaxed her into the creek, splashing laughter that echoed the firefly's glow. It was a rhythm of reclamation, mending the tears of isolation with threads of tenderness. Yet the past's tendrils clung stubborn. Rebecca visited weekly, her Mercedes idling discreetly at the lot's edge, bearing casseroles and confessions wrapped in linen napkins. Divorcing Harlan had cost her the mansion, the club membership, the facade, but gained her a tentative peace, therapy sessions in Macon where she unpacked the high school venom like old luggage. "I see it now," she'd say, sipping sun tea on the porch, Lila dozing inside with a book. "How I betrayed not just you, Charlotte, but myself. Pushed you down to stay afloat. But water finds its level, doesn't it?" Charlotte nodded, the words a salve on old burns, their conversations drifting to shared dreams. Rebecca eyeing a gallery in Savannah for her rediscovered watercolors, Charlotte musing on expanding the diner into a community hub, free meals for the mill's ghosts. Forgiveness wasn't erasure. It was excavation, unearthing the humanity beneath the hurt. One afternoon, as cicadas droned their endless hymn, Rebecca pulled a faded photo from her purse. Willow Creek '07, the senior class under the auditorium oak, Charlotte blurred at the edge, Rebecca center stage with her crown of cruelty. "Burn it," Rebecca offered, lighter flickering. Charlotte took it, flame licking the corner, watching faces curl to ash. "No. Frame it. Reminder that we survived." Harlan, meanwhile, slunk to the periphery, a shadow at the Piggly Wiggly, nursing grudges over six-packs, his bank job lost to the scandal's ripple. Whispers said he'd decamp to his brothers in Mobile, but Eldridge harbored no illusions. Men like him festered, waiting for cracks. Charlotte spotted him once, lurking across from the diner, eyes boring holes through the plate glass, but she met his stare with a wave, casual as offering seconds on pie. Power, she'd learned, wasn't in the punch, it was in the refusal to flinch. Lila's awakening deepened their bond, her sketches evolving from escapes to embraces. Portraits of Charlotte at the grill, fierce and soft. Abstracts of intertwined forms, curves echoing bodies in repose. She enrolled in community college up in Athens, art classes fueling her fire, weekend drives in the old Ford taking them to Atlanta's queer nights, where rainbow flags flew unapologetic and hands held free under street lamp glow. "This is us," Lila breathed one night in a dive bar's haze. Body swaying to an indie folk tune, Charlotte's arms around her waist. No hiding. But Eldridge tested that freedom's edges. Pastor Ellis's sermon sharpened, family sanctity, a dog whistle for the Voss fallout, pews thinning as younger congregants shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hargrove boycotted still, her empty booth a silent protest, but others filled it, widows with stories of lost sons, mill workers with calluses matching Charlotte's, drawn by the diner's unspoken welcome. One evening a teenage boy, timid with eyeliner smudged like war paint, slipped in ordering a milkshake with shaking hands. "Heard it's safe here," he muttered, and Charlotte slid the glass over, adding a wink. "Safest place in town, kid. Drink up." Word spread, Hayes Hollow blooming into sanctuary. Free suppers for the displaced, open mics where Lila read poetry that peeled back layers of longing. Charlotte watched her girl unfurl, the storm in her eyes calming to a steady light, and felt the stir of something profound. Not just love but legacy, passing the torch of resilience. Yet climax brewed in the heat's nadir, August's furnace forging reckonings. Harlan returned, sober but seething, cornering Charlotte in the alley after closing, gravel crunching under his boots like bones. "You think you've won?" he snarled, breath ragged, fists balled. "Turned my wife against me, my daughter into that? I'll burn this place down first." Charlotte stood tall, mop handle gripped like a staff, heart thundering but voice steel. "Won? This isn't a game, Harlan. It's life. Yours was built on squeezing folks dry, now it's crumbling. Lila chose joy over your chains. Let her go." He lunged, wild, but the alley's shadows birthed witnesses. Lila, emerging from the house with phone in hand. Rebecca, alerted by instinct, screeching to a halt in her new compact. Together they formed a wall. Mother and lover, united in defiance, Harlan faltering, the fight draining from him like sweat. He crumpled against the dumpster, sobs racking his frame. The bully unmasked as broken man. I just wanted family, he choked, and in that vulnerability, Charlotte saw the cycle's core. Fear masquerading as fury handed down generations. She knelt then, tentative, hand on his shoulder. Family isn't possession. It's choice. Start with forgiving yourself. He left shattered, the alley emptying to stars, and in the aftermath transformation rippled. Harlan entered rehab in September, tentative steps toward amends. Rebecca's gallery opening drew crowds from Macon, her watercolors, bold strokes of hidden desires, selling swift. Eldridge exhaled, the air lighter, petitions for a community center at the old mill gaining traction. Charlotte's name on the charter. Through it all, Charlotte and Lila anchored each other, their love a quiet revolution. Kisses in the dawn light, sketches framed above the bed, futures sketched in tentative plans. Oregon for Lila's MFA, a food truck trailing behind. Betrayal had scarred them. Harlan's rage, Rebecca's past sins, the town's complicit silence. But from those wounds sprang grace, a human tapestry woven from pain and perseverance. As autumn leaves whispered surrender, Charlotte stood on the porch, Lila's head on her shoulder, watching fireflies claim the dusk. We made it, Lila murmured, and Charlotte pressed a kiss to her temple, tasting salt and sweetness. Not just made it, she replied. We built it. Better. In Eldridge's slow thaw they were the proof. Different wasn't curse but compass, guiding toward a world remade in kindness's image. The years folded upon themselves like the bellows of an accordion, each season in Eldridge compressing time until decades felt like chapters in a well-thumbed novel. Hayes Hollow evolved from diner to nexus, a community kitchen by 2030, where solar panels gleamed on the roof and murals by Lila splashed the walls in riots of color. Magnolias entwined with rainbows, figures hand in hand against Chattahoochee sunsets. Charlotte, at 52, moved with the economy of hard-won peace, her hair threaded silver like the creek's hidden veins, laugh lines etching maps of joy around eyes that had seen storms and starred in their passing. Lila thrived, her art degree from Portland a launchpad to exhibits in Seattle and back home, canvases capturing the queer Southern soul. Women in overalls stealing kisses under pecan trees. Elders holding court with stories of hidden loves. They married in the diner's back garden, a simple affair under dogwood arches. Rebecca officiating in a suit tailored sharp, Harlan, sober 5 years, humbled by NA meetings and Lila's tentative forgiveness, grilling burgers with shaky hands. The town came, not all but enough. Pastor Ellis retired to Florida, his successor preaching inclusion with a drawl softened by seminary. Mrs. Hargrove sent regrets and a check for the kitchen's expansion fund. Their life wasn't without tempests. Lila's first gallery show in Atlanta drew slurs spray-painted on the venue's door, Sodom South, echoing Harlan's old venom, but Charlotte stood sentinel, arm around her wife's waist as police taped the scene, turning outrage into ink for Lila's next series. Wounds as windows. Rebecca battled cancer in 34, her treatments a gauntlet of chemo and courage, emerging scarred but sculpted, her watercolors bolder, exhibited alongside Lila's in a joint show titled Unburied. Harlan passed quietly in 37, heart attack during a fishing trip, leaving a will that endowed scholarships for youth pursuing authentic paths. His final atonement, whispered over his grave. Through it, Charlotte and Lila's love deepened, roots intertwining like the oaks shading their porch. They adopted a daughter in 32, Eloise, a wide-eyed foster kid from the mill's shadow, with curls like Lila's and a curiosity that rivaled Charlotte's own. Eloise grew sketching at the counter, learning to flip eggs while absorbing tales of Willow Creek ghosts and Portland rains. The cycle broken not by erasure, but embrace. You two are my heroes, she'd say, freckles dancing in the diner's glow, and Charlotte would ruffle her hair, throat tight with the miracle of lineage reclaimed. Eldridge transformed in tandem, the community center rising from the mill's bones. Classes in welding and writing, potlucks where stories spilled freer than sweet tea. Charlotte mentored, her free meals a staple. Tuesdays for the unhoused, Fridays for elders swapping recipes laced with memory. The town's fabric frayed and rewove, prejudices fading like old newsprint, though scars lingered. Whispers at football games, glances at pride flags fluttering from porches. But progress was patchwork, human in its imperfections, and Charlotte taught Eloise that folks change slow like molasses. But they change. In their 60th year together, Lila's easel still dusted with pigment, Charlotte's hands gnarled but gentle, they returned to Willow Creek High for a guest talk, the auditorium packed with students whose eyes held no malice, only questions. Charlotte spoke first, voice steady as the river. I was bullied here for being different, called names that cut deeper than knives. But different became my strength, the love I found, the life I built. Lila followed, slides of her art projecting giants on the screen, words weaving betrayal into beauty. My mother was the bully once. My father too. But forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the bravest art. The applause thundered, genuine, and in the lobby afterward, an old classmate, Ellie Ramirez, gray-streaked and grinning, hugged Charlotte tight. You were my crush, you know. Never said. Laughter bubbled, tears tracing paths the past alchemized to gold. That night, back home, they walked the creek, Eloise skipping ahead with her own sketchpad, the water murmuring approval. Lila slipped her hand into Charlotte's. The fit is perfect as the first time. We fed more than bodies, she said softly. We fed souls. Yours, mine. The town's. Charlotte squeezed, watching fireflies claim the dusk once more. And in return they fed us back. Freedom tastes sweetest shared. As stars pricked the velvet sky, Eldridge slumbered around them. A town no longer chained by silence, but sung by survivors. Their story, etched in murals and memories, whispered a truth as old as the South's red clay. Love, in all its forbidden fire, was the ultimate rebellion, the grace that redeems. And in that redemption they found not just survival but sanctity. A human hymn to the different, the daring, the divine.